I guess I really don't know what Christmas is all about.
Could you imagine being snatched in the middle of the night while you're walking with your mother? Well, on December 16th, 2019, 16-year-old Carol Sanchez was walking up the streets in Brooklyn with her mother when she was violently snatched and thrown into a vehicle. Surveillance footage in the area caught the attack.
But you can kind of make out what happens. A 16-year-old walking along Eagle Avenue near East 156th Street. Two men she didn't know jump out of a car, grab her, and then drag her into a car, knocking down her mother. The beige-colored four-door sedan had stopped in front of 745 Eagle Avenue.
As you can probably guess, Carol's mom was just shocked that this happened. They were literally walking down the street in the rain. Moments later, somebody pulled up and dragged her daughter into the car. So after the police was contacted, an Amber Alert was issued for Carol Sanchez. Not only that, social media went up. People started feeling like maybe sex traffickers were literally just picking up little girls off the street. So now it was a race to find Carol Sanchez.
The fact that people can look at O.J. Simpson's history of abusing Nicole and still think he didn't kill her and Ron is absurd to me. They got together when she was freshly 18 and he was 30. He also made her drop out of school to spend more time with him and was already rich, famous, and married, so there was a problematic power dynamic between them from the get-go. He was jealous and forceful from their very first date. She couldn't even go to the bathroom without telling him where she was going. In 1989, he beat her and threatened to kill her and was arrested for spousal battery, but virtually nothing happened to him. There were 52 incidents of abuse, police were called 9 times, and OJ was only arrested once. Even after she was able to leave him, he continued to stalk, control, and abuse her. OJ manipulated Nicole, her family, and the public into thinking that he loved her and was a good guy, because that's what abusers do.
Medieval torture device part 20. These are called the punishing shoes. The victim would typically be strapped on to something with their head and arms and see how long they can stand on their tippy toes. When they fall back, the spikes would be jammed into their heels.
The man who killed Halloween. Have you ever wondered why parents are so afraid of trick-or-treat candy? Halloween night, 1974, Ronald O'Brien and his neighbor took their kids out trick-or-treating. All was going well until someone didn't open up their door for them. The kids walked away dejected. They weren't getting any candy from this one. Or so they thought. O'Brien came up behind them holding 5 pixie sticks. He claimed that the man had opened his door after all, it just took him a little while. He handed each of the children a pixie stick and handed one to the neighbor boy. Then they finished trick-or-treating and all went home. Later that night, little Timothy O'Brien opened up his pixie stick and started eating it. He claimed that it had a bitter taste, but his dad gave him some Gatorade to wash it down. Not long after that, he was in the bathroom vomiting and he began convulsing. His father called an ambulance, but it was too late and Timothy died in the ambulance. Follow me for part 2. The Man Who Killed Halloween, Part 2. Police ran an autopsy on Timothy and found a lethal dose of potassium cyanide in his system. They ran a test on his pixie stick and found traces of the poison. Timothy's death caused a panic in their town. Parents took all of their kids' candy to the police station to be tested. After this, police went to the other kids who were given pixie sticks and tested theirs. These pixie sticks were found to have enough cyanide in them to kill 4 adults. So the question from that point on was, where did the kids get these pixie sticks? Ronald O'Brien was questioned and he eventually led them back to the house that he claimed that he got these pixie sticks from. The same house which he previously had claimed he didn't remember where he got them from. However, it was later learned that this man was an air traffic controller and had not gotten home until 11 p.m. on Halloween. He even had 200 people to back up his claim. So, yet again, the police were at a dead end. That is, until they found out something about the O'Briens. Come back for part 3. The Man Who Killed Halloween, Part 3. After hitting a dead end, police began to look into the O'Briens. They found that the O'Briens were in a lot of financial debt, over $100,000. Ronald O'Brien had proven himself incapable of holding a job, having held over 21 jobs in the previous 10 years. When police questioned his coworkers, they came back with some pretty alarming evidence. O'Brien had asked one of them if it was possible for him to purchase potassium cyanide. He asked a professor from a class he was attending how much cyanide it would take to kill specific sized animals. and someone who worked at a local wholesale chemical store claimed that O'Brien had come into his store asking to purchase potassium cyanide. After a little more investigation, it was discovered that O'Brien had taken out 2 insurance policies on his 2 children, which, if both of them had died, would amount to $100,000.
Welcome back to Female Murderer TikTok. This one's about Nanny Doss. Buckle up. Nanny and her husband had 4 kids. 2 of them died back to back from poisonings. The husband was like, something ain't right, and then he took the kids and left. So Nanny gets remarried, kills him, buys a house and land with the insurance money, and is like, oh, I like this. She reunites with her daughter. Her daughter's like, hey, can you watch my baby for a little bit? And she's like, totally. And then the baby dies in like 3 days. And then it starts to get lethal. She marries her 3rd husband. He dies that year. Her mom breaks her hip and she's like, I'll take care of you. She's dead. Both of her sisters die in the same year in different towns, all while Nanny's visiting. She marries her 4th husband. He doesn't even make it a few months. Then she marries her 5th husband. He dies a month later. But finally, in that autopsy, they were like, there's a lot of rat poison in this guy. Did you do this? And then Nanny goes, yeah, I did that to all of them. So she gets life in prison, and before she dies, they interview her, and they're like, why did you do it? Was it for the money? And she goes, money? I was bored.
I want to bring light to a person whose death has not been talked about enough in the Black community and just in general. So this is Kendrick Johnson, and he was murdered on January 11, 2013. His body was found rolled up in this mat at school, which is just completely disturbing. Detectives ruled this an accident, which is completely absurd, but I'll get into why they ruled it as an accident later. Detectives said that he went into the mat to retrieve his shoe and he got stuck and suffocated. His family did not believe this, so they did some digging on their own and hired somebody to actually check out his body. It turns out that he died from blunt force trauma. It is suspected that 2 white males that went to his school actually killed him because they were seen on video coming into the gymnasium after him. It was later found out that he was stuffed with newspaper too. He had no organs or intestine. I believe one of the boys' dad actually was a police officer, which is why this was so easy to cover up. His family sued, but that would never bring back Kendrick Johnson, and that would never bring actual justice.
True crime in 60 seconds. Let's go. On February 14th, 1993, 5-year-old Sarah West and her little brother Seth were being babysat by their 16-year-old neighbor, Billy Schaefer. While watching a horror movie, Billy decided that he wanted to molest Sarah. So while Sarah was sleeping, he went ahead and molested her. He then stabbed her and mutilated her body. It was later found out that he also shot her in the head and he bit her on her thigh and breast. Billy then put Sarah's body into 2 trash bags and threw the trash bags over an embankment. Billy was arrested and openly confessed to this horrific crime. He pled guilty to aggravated murder and was sentenced to life with possibility of parole. On December 2nd, 2019, Billy did go in front of a judge and his request to go on parole was denied due to the horrific nature of this crime.
This woman killed 600 men with makeup. Giulia Tofana lived during the 17th century in Italy when women didn't have a lot of power. But she was an entrepreneur who developed her own poison called acqua tofana. It was colorless, tasteless, odorless, could kill a man in 4 drops, and was undetectable after death. She sold it to women disguised as cosmetics so that they could kill their abusive husbands and live out their lives freely as widows without any suspicion. This went on for decades before officials realized she was one of the most successful poisoners in history, and she was executed.
People are terrified of this mannequin in Mexico, and here's why. This mannequin is actually speculated to be a real human being. People say that the mannequin looks a lot like the daughter of the shop owner. Her name is Pascuala Esparza, and according to the story, she was getting ready to get married one day when she got tragically bit by a black widow. Not too long after her death, the mannequin appeared in the shop. People also say that she has extremely real-looking hands and varicose veins on her legs. Some people have claimed that her eyes have followed them when they walked by. Let me know what you guys think about the story down below.
Here's one of the dumbest ways a serial killer has gotten caught. Serial killer Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK killer, took pleasure in messing with the police officers that were assigned to his case. He began sending them messages after a decade-long hiatus. He had a little fun, but then he began to get bored sending them regular messages. So, he asked the police if a floppy disk could be traced back to him. Of course, they told him no, so he sent them a floppy disk. The police were able to trace the metadata on the disk back to the church that he was working at and caught him.
It just doesn't make sense. This case is strange. Joshua Maddox went missing in 2008, and he wasn't found until 2015. When an unused cabin a quarter mile away from his home was being demolished, his body was found inside the chimney with his knees above his head, and the police ruled it an accidental death, and they said he climbed in from the top and got stuck. But that doesn't explain how he got in the chimney, because there was a metal grate on top of it blocking the entrance, and he couldn't have gone in through the fireplace because there was a heavy breakfast bar that had been ripped out of the wall and pushed in front of it. Or why he was only wearing a shirt. All his other clothes were folded up inside the cabin, so he would have had to have been inside the cabin, taken off his clothes, gone outside, climbed up on the roof, and then tried to enter the cabin again through the chimney?
True crime in 60 seconds? Let's go. On April 22nd, 1964, Chester and Dora Franzak gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, Paul. The next morning, a nurse walks into the room asking if she could take Paul away for some testing. Dora hands him over, and then 20 minutes later, a real nurse walks in. This is when they realize that Paul is missing. This would become Chicago's largest manhunt in history at the time, involving over 175,000 postal workers and over 200 officers and FBI agents looking for Paul. Over 600 homes were searched, but sadly, nothing came of this. 2 years later, Chester and Dora were notified that an abandoned boy was found outside of a department store in New Jersey. And a year later, they claimed him as Paul, and they lived happily ever after, or so we think. In 2012, Paul got his hands on some DNA testing kits, and he found out that he was not biologically Paul Joseph Franzak. So where is the real Paul? We don't know.
Okay, Crime TikTok, let's talk about sasaengs, or more commonly known as private life stalkers.
Over the years, the K-pop community has been growing, and with an increasing fan base, there will be people who take it too far. To premise, a sasaeng is not a regular fan. There are people who will stalk their idols and their favorite band groups. They sneak private pictures of them in their hotel, chase them down, and buy private flight information. Some even go to the extremes of buying private phone informations. These people do not care if they harm their idols, they just want to be recognized and noticed. Some even go to the extremes of harming themselves for their idols. And one time a sasaeng gave a K-pop idol a glass of orange juice and put glue inside of it, which left the idol going to the hospital and coughing up blood.
Maybe you can solve this case because what the police say happened doesn't make any sense. The night of January 12, 2010, police officers found Joanne Romain's car left at a church, and across the road were tracks in the snow leading to a lake, so they concluded she walked into the water to drown. Even after her body was found 70 days later, nowhere near where she supposedly entered the water, police ruled it a suicide. To do that, she would have had to cross 4 lanes of traffic, walk through the snow in high heels, then get into the water in January in Michigan, water that wasn't deep and had no current, to drown herself. My theory is that it wasn't suicide at all. It was murder by someone who knew how to stage the scene, someone like a police officer. And there are more unsettling details to this case you can find on Unsolved Mysteries Volume 2, watch now only on Netflix. Using the hashtag Unsolved Mysteries, let me know your theory.
Here's an intriguing mystery surrounding the death of John Wheeler. It all started on December 31st, 2010, in the town of Wilmington, Delaware. A garbage truck had once again dumped out its contents for the day. However, this time, there was a body of a man named John Wheeler. Wheeler was the executive director of the Vietnam War Memorial and had close ties to the White House, so it was obviously odd that he ended up dead and in this landfill. When cops looked closer into this case, they found more oddities. A short while prior to his death, his house was ransacked, and a neighboring house, which was under construction, was bombed using smoke bombs, which is obviously even more bizarre. Also, in the moments close to his death, Wheeler was found acting extremely bizarre and paranoid. Some might contribute it to his bipolar disorder, but I personally think someone might have hired an assassin or a hitman after him.
If you want to learn specifics about this case and others like it, make sure to watch the show Unsolved Mysteries, which is only available on Netflix. Volume 2 of the show just dropped and I absolutely recommend it. Make sure to drop your own theories about the show below using the hashtag Unsolved Mysteries.
Where did her baby go? 7 days after giving birth in a Scottish hospital in 1975, Lydia Reed was told that her baby son Gary had died. She asked to see the body, but the baby brought to her was big and blonde. Her son had been tiny and brunette. When she refused to accept that the body they had shown her was her son's, the staff claimed she was suffering from postpartum depression. But when she carried his coffin, it seemed oddly light. She began to suspect that the hospital had illegally harvested Gary's organs. After 42 years, she won a legal battle to get his coffin exhumed, and inside, there was no body. There had never been a body in there, so...
For years, David and Louise Turpin kept their 13 kids locked away in their California home. In January of 2018, 2 of the kids escaped and managed to call 911. The children would be chained up for months at a time, only letting them free to use the bathroom and brush their teeth. All the children but the youngest were very malnourished. The oldest was 29 and only weighed 82 pounds. They were never fed breakfast and they lived in filth. One of the children said it was hard to breathe and she hadn't showered in nearly a year. Apparently, the children had planned multiple escapes before being successful in 2018. In April 2019, David and Louise were sentenced to 25 to life. The children are all now in good health, several are living on their own and even attending college.